My name is Adam Turner. For almost a year, I had lunch at the same little diner every Friday. Same booth, same order, same waitress. Her name was Lucy Parker. She was the kind of woman people noticed without meaning to. Not because she was loud. She wasn't. Not because she tried to get attention. She didn't. It was the opposite. Lucy had a quiet way of moving through the diner, like she carried more on her shoulders than anyone could see. Every Friday at 12:15, I walked through the front door, took the booth near the window, and ordered the same thing. Turkey club, black coffee, no pickle. The first time she remembered my order, I thought it was good service. The 10th time, I thought it was sweet. By the 50th time, I started looking forward to Fridays for reasons that had nothing to do with lunch. She always smiled when she saw me. Not a big smile. Not a fake customer service smile. Just a small one. Warm. Familiar. Like I was a chapter in her week 2. But we never really talked. Not about anything that mattered. Until one rainy Friday afternoon, when Lucy placed my check on the table, turned away, then suddenly came back. She slipped a folded napkin under the receipt. So quickly I almost missed it. Then she looked at me and said the same thing she always said. "Have a good weekend, Adam." But her eyes said something different. I waited until she walked away. Then I unfolded the napkin. There were only 7 words written in blue ink. "Please wait outside. Don't let anyone see us talking." I read it twice, then a third time. My first thought was that it had to be a joke. My second thought was that Lucy Parker did not seem like the kind of woman who joked like that. I paid the bill, left a tip, walked outside, and stood beneath the awning while rain hit the sidewalk in silver streaks. 2 minutes later, the side door of the diner opened. Lucy stepped out. No apron, no smile, just worry. She looked over her shoulder once, then hurried toward me. "Adam." Her voice was lower than I'd ever heard it. "I know this is strange. It is. I wouldn't ask if I had anyone else." A chill moved through me that had nothing to do with the rain. "What happened?" Lucy swallowed hard, then whispered, "I need your help." 3 months earlier, I had no idea that one small diner, one quiet waitress, and one folded note would change the course of my life. 3 months earlier, Friday had always been my favorite day of the week. Not because the workday was shorter, not because the weekend was waiting just around the corner, because of a little family diner called Parker's Corner Cafe. It sat on the edge of downtown between an old bookstore and a flower shop that somehow stayed in business year after year. Nothing about the place stood out. The sign was faded. The booths had been repaired more times than anyone could count. The coffee mugs never matched. And yet, every Friday around noon, every booth was full. Construction workers, office employees, retired couples, families with young children. Everyone seemed to know everyone. Except me. I'd moved to town a little over a year earlier after accepting a management position at a local engineering company. The job was good. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Most evenings I went home, made dinner, watched television for an hour, then went to bed. Week after week. Month after month. Life wasn't bad. It was simply predictable. Then one Friday, my coworker Jason looked over the wall of my cubicle. "You still eating those depressing vending machine sandwiches?" I laughed. "They're convenient. They're terrible. So where do you suggest?" He grinned. "Parker's. Trust me. You'll thank me." I almost didn't go. Looking back now, I'm glad I ignored that instinct. The little bell above the cafe door rang as I stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Fresh coffee, grilled bread, bacon, cinnamon. The kind of smell that instantly reminded you of weekends at your grandparents' house. A woman in her 50s stood behind the register. "Sit anywhere you'd like, honey." Her name tag read, Susan. I thanked her and chose the booth by the window. Less than a minute later, someone stopped beside my table. "Good afternoon." I looked up. That was the first time I saw Lucy Parker. She wore a simple navy blue apron over a white shirt. Her dark hair was tied into a loose ponytail. She wasn't wearing much makeup. She didn't need it. There was something effortlessly kind about her face. The kind of kindness that couldn't be practiced in a mirror. She smiled politely. First time here? Is it that obvious? She laughed softly. I've memorized most of our regulars. I guess I stand out. Only because you're new. She handed me a menu. What can I get you? I looked down for a few seconds before answering. The Turkey Club. And black coffee. She smiled. Good choice. As she turned to leave, she paused. Oh, we don't put pickles on Fridays. I looked up, confused. She grinned. I'm kidding. Took me a second. Then I laughed. She laughed too. It wasn't much. Just a silly joke between two strangers. But for some reason, it stayed with me for the rest of the afternoon. I came back the following Friday. Then the Friday after that. And before I realized it, going to Parker's Corner Cafe had quietly become part of my life. Weeks turned into months. Without either of us saying it out loud, we fell into a routine. Every Friday at exactly 12:15, the little bell above the cafe door would ring. Lucy would look up from whatever she was doing. The moment our eyes met, she smiled. By the time I reached my usual booth, my coffee was already brewing. Sometimes she even had it waiting before I sat down. Turkey Club, she'd say with a grin. Black coffee. No pickle. I laughed. You really do remember everything. She shrugged. It makes my job easier. I think you're just showing off. Maybe a little. Soon our conversations became a little longer. Not much. 30 seconds here. A minute there. She'd ask how work was going. I'd ask how busy the cafe had been. She told me Susan was her mother, that the cafe had been in the family for nearly 30 years. We almost had to sell it after my dad passed away. She said it so calmly that I almost missed the sadness behind the words. I'm sorry. She smiled politely. It was a long time ago. But thank you. I nodded. I didn't push. Some people tell you their stories because they're ready. Others only open the first page. One Friday, as she placed my plate on the table, she frowned. You look tired. I laughed. Is it that obvious? You've got those little lines under your eyes. I've been working late. She tilted her head. When was the last time you took a day off? I thought about it. Longer than I should have. I honestly can't remember. She crossed her arms. That's not something to be proud of. No. You only get one life. I smiled. You're surprisingly wise. My mom says I sound 58. I looked toward Susan behind the register. I don't think she'd appreciate that. Lucy laughed. Probably not. By early summer, Susan had started treating me like family. The moment I walked in, she'd wave from behind the register. Adam, your table's waiting. One afternoon, she carried over a slice of homemade apple pie. I didn't order dessert. I know. It's on the house. I looked at Lucy. She quickly looked away, pretending to organize napkins. Susan noticed. So, she smiled mischievously. My daughter says you're the easiest customer she's ever had. Lucy immediately looked up. Mom, what? I'm complimenting him. Lucy shook her head, laughing. You don't have to embarrass me. I wasn't trying to. Yes, you were. I couldn't help smiling. Watching the two of them tease each other reminded me of something I'd been missing for a long time. Home. One Friday, I arrived nearly an hour later than usual. The lunch rush was almost over. When Lucy saw me, relief flashed across her face. There you are. I blinked. You were expecting me? She froze for half a second, then laughed awkwardly. I mean, you always come on Fridays. I figured something happened. I smiled. Long meeting. She nodded. I'm glad. I raised an eyebrow. Glad I had a meeting? She laughed. No. I'm glad you're okay. It was the first time either of us admitted, without actually saying the words, that we noticed when the other person wasn't there. And from that Friday on, I started looking forward to those little conversations even more than the lunch itself. By the end of August, Fridays had become more than just lunch. They had become something I quietly looked forward to all week. I never admitted it to anyone, not even to myself. But every Thursday evening, I'd already be wondering what Lucy would joke about the next day. or whether she'd remember another tiny detail about me that I'd forgotten mentioning. Somehow, she always did. One Friday, she placed my coffee on the table before I even sat down. No cream. No sugar. Extra hot. I smiled. I don't remember ordering. You didn't. You always drink it this way. I looked at her for a second. That's kind of impressive. She shrugged, trying to hide a smile. I notice things. I can tell. A few minutes later, while I was eating, an older couple walked into the cafe. Before Susan could greet them, Lucy was already carrying 2 mugs of coffee toward their usual booth. No menus, I asked when she returned. She laughed. They've been married 43 years. He orders pancakes. She orders oatmeal. He complains about the coffee. She says it's perfect. They've done that every Friday since I was a teenager. I smiled. And you remember all of it? I remember everyone. She looked around the diner. I think that's my favorite part of working here. People don't realize it, but little routines matter. Those words stayed with me, maybe because she was right, or maybe because, without realizing it, she had quietly become part of mine. The following Friday, I was halfway through my lunch when a man walked into the diner. Tall, well-dressed, confident, probably around 40. The moment Lucy saw him, her smile disappeared. It happened so quickly that I almost thought I'd imagined it. He sat at a booth near the back. Lucy walked over with a menu. Even from across the room, I could tell something was different. She stayed professional, but she wasn't comfortable. Not even close. When she came back toward the counter, Susan quietly touched her arm. You okay? Lucy forced a smile. I'm fine, but she didn't look fine. Not at all. Over the next few weeks, the same man kept coming back. Always Friday. Always around the same time I did. Always asking for Lucy's section. At first I assumed they knew each other. Maybe an old friend. An ex-boyfriend. A cousin. Something. But the more I watched, the less convinced I became. She never smiled around him. Never joked. Never stayed at his table longer than necessary. One afternoon, I noticed him trying to continue a conversation after she'd already picked up the empty plate. Lucy politely excused herself. He reached out as if he wanted to stop her. She stepped back, just enough to avoid his hand. It lasted less than 2 seconds. Most people in the diner probably never noticed. I did. When I paid my bill that afternoon, I nodded toward the man. Busy today. Lucy followed my eyes for only a moment before looking away. Yeah. Her smile looked forced. It has been. She handed me the receipt. Our fingers brushed for a second. Normally she'd tell me to have a great weekend. This time, she didn't say anything. She simply looked at me for a brief moment, almost as if she wanted to ask something. Then another customer called her name. She turned and hurried away. I left the diner with a strange feeling I couldn't explain. At the time, I had no idea that the very next Friday, she'd slip a folded note under my check. The following Friday arrived with heavy rain. The kind that turned the streets silver and kept most people indoors. The diner was quieter than usual. Only a handful of tables were occupied. When I walked in, the little bell above the door rang. Lucy looked up. For a split second, she smiled. Then she glanced toward the back of the diner. The man was already there. Brian Mitchell. I didn't know his name yet. Only that he'd become part of the Friday routine. And not in a good way. He was sitting in the same booth as always. Coffee untouched. Eyes following Lucy every time she crossed the room. It wasn't obvious enough to make a scene, but it was obvious enough to make me uncomfortable. Lucy walked over carrying my coffee. Good afternoon, Adam. Busy. She looked around the nearly empty diner and smiled faintly. I wish. I laughed. Not good for business. No. She placed the mug in front of me. But peaceful. For the first time in months, our conversation ended almost immediately. Every few seconds she glanced toward Brian's table. Not because she wanted to, because she had to. About 20 minutes later, I noticed Brian wave her over again. His cup was still almost full. There was no reason to call her. Yet she walked over anyway. I couldn't hear the conversation. but I could read body language. Lucy kept her hands folded in front of her apron. Brian leaned back in the booth, smiling as he spoke. She answered politely. He kept talking. She nodded once, twice, then quietly walked away. When she reached the kitchen doors, she closed her eyes for just a second, as if she needed one deep breath before facing the rest of the afternoon. Susan stepped beside her. "Did he bother you again?" Lucy answered so quietly I couldn't hear the words. Susan frowned. "I can talk to him." Lucy immediately shook her head. "No, please don't. He'll only stay longer." Susan sighed. "I don't like this." "Neither do I." They noticed me looking. Both smiled at exactly the same time. Too quickly. The kind of smile people use when they're pretending everything is fine. A few minutes later, Brian stood up to leave. Instead of walking straight to the register, he stopped beside Lucy. He said something. She took one step backward. He smiled, then finally walked out into the rain. The entire exchange lasted maybe 10 seconds. But it changed the atmosphere inside the diner. Only after the front door closed did Lucy relax her shoulders. I had never seen someone look so relieved to watch a customer leave. When I finished eating, Lucy brought my check. She placed it on the table exactly like she always did. Except this time, her hand lingered on the edge of the receipt for half a second. Just long enough to slide something underneath it. A folded white napkin. She never looked directly at me. Instead, she quietly said, "Have a good weekend, Adam." The same words she'd said every Friday for almost a year. Only this time, her voice trembled. I waited until she turned away, then unfolded the napkin beneath the receipt. Written neatly in blue ink were 7 words. "Please wait outside. Don't let anyone see us talking." My heartbeat quickened. I looked toward Lucy. She was serving another table as though nothing had happened. No one in the diner seemed to notice. Not Susan. Not the customers. Not even Brian, who had already disappeared into the rain. I folded the napkin, paid the bill, left my usual tip, walked out into the cold afternoon, and suddenly understood that whatever had been bothering Lucy for the past several weeks, she had finally decided to tell me. The rain had become heavier by the time I stepped outside. Water dripped steadily from the awning above the diner. I stood near my truck, pretending to check my phone. 1 minute passed, then another. For a moment, I wondered if I'd misunderstood the note. Maybe she'd changed her mind. Maybe she'd only written it because she'd panicked. Then the side door opened. Lucy stepped outside, pulling her jacket tightly around herself. She looked both ways before walking toward me. Not dramatically. Not like someone in a movie. More like someone who didn't want to be noticed. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I know this is strange." I smiled gently. "I think we've already established that." To my surprise, she laughed, just for a second. Then the smile disappeared again. "I wouldn't have involved you if I had another option." "What happened?" She looked down at the wet pavement. "You noticed the man who's been coming in every Friday? The one in the gray jacket?" She nodded. "His name is Brian. You know him?" "I wish I didn't." She folded her arms against the cold. "He started coming here about 6 months ago. At first he was just another customer. He'd leave good tips. He was polite, so I never thought much about him." She took a slow breath. "Then he started waiting until my shift ended." I frowned. "He asked me to dinner. I said no. He asked again the next week. I said no again. And again. And again." I stayed silent, letting her continue. "I've never been rude to him. I didn't want to embarrass him. I thought eventually he'd understand. But instead, he started coming every Friday. He always asks for my section. He always tries to keep me talking. And every time I tell him I'm not interested, he acts like I just need more time." "Does he threaten you?" She shook her head. "No." "Has he touched you?" "Only once. He tried to grab my hand. I pulled away. Since then he's stayed just close enough to make me uncomfortable, but not close enough for anyone to call the police." I understood exactly what she meant. It wasn't a crime. It was a situation. An exhausting one. So why tell me? She looked at me for a long moment, then smiled sadly. Because after almost a year, you're the only customer who ever made me feel completely safe. Those words caught me off guard. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. She hesitated. Need someone to walk me to my car after work today. I blinked. That's it. She nodded. I know it sounds silly. It doesn't. I've been asking myself for 2 weeks if I should write that note. And today, I finally did. I looked toward the diner. When do you finish? 6. I'll be here. She searched my face. You will. I smiled. I told you. You don't have to convince me. Relief washed over her face. For the first time since she'd walked outside, she smiled the way she always smiled on Fridays. Warm. Genuine. Thank you, Adam. As she turned to go back inside, I realized something. I had spent months looking forward to seeing Lucy every Friday. But standing there in the rain, I understood that this was the first time she had truly trusted me. And somehow, that meant even more than I expected. I spent the rest of the afternoon thinking about Lucy, not because she had asked for my help, because she'd trusted me enough to ask. Those are two very different things. At exactly 6 o'clock, I parked across the street from Parker's Corner Cafe. The open sign was still glowing in the front window. Inside, only a few customers remained. I watched through the windshield as Susan flipped one of the chairs upside down onto a table. Closing time. 5 minutes later, the front door opened. Lucy stepped outside carrying her purse. She looked around. The moment she spotted my truck, I saw her shoulders relax. She walked over with a small smile. You actually came. I said I would. I know. She laughed quietly. I guess I'm still surprised. I stepped out of the truck. Ready? She nodded. My car's around back. We walked toward the employee parking lot behind the diner. The evening air was cool. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Lucy finally broke the silence. You know what's strange? What? I almost threw that note away. You did. She nodded. I wrote it on Wednesday. Then I told myself it was a bad idea. Thursday, I almost tore it up. And this morning, I almost stayed home. I smiled. I'm glad you didn't. So am I. Her car was an older silver Honda. Nothing fancy. She unlocked it but didn't open the door right away. Instead, she leaned against it and looked at me. Can I tell you something embarrassing? You've already told me quite a bit. She smiled. I was scared you'd think I was trying to flirt with you. I laughed. I'll admit, for about 5 seconds, I wondered. She covered her face. Oh no, I'm kidding. She lightly nudged my arm. That's not funny. It kind of is. She laughed too. For the first time since we'd left the diner, the tension was gone. Brian wasn't always like this, she said after a moment. He actually seemed nice. I even thought he was just lonely. So I tried to be polite. I nodded. A lot of people mistake kindness for interest. She looked down. I know. And once they do, it's hard to fix. I wish I'd been more direct from the beginning. You shouldn't have to feel guilty for being kind. She looked at me. Thank you. Just then, headlights turned into the parking lot. Lucy immediately went quiet. A dark SUV rolled slowly past us. Neither of us recognized the driver. The vehicle continued toward the opposite exit and disappeared. Lucy let out a long breath. I hate that I react like that now. You think every car is his. She nodded. I do. I understood. Fear doesn't always come from what happens. Sometimes it comes from wondering if something might happen. Before getting into her car, Lucy smiled. I owe you dinner. You owe me nothing. I insist. I've accepted enough free pie from your mom. She laughed. That's true. So, next Friday, I smiled. I'll be here. She opened the car door. Not at the diner. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, I'd like to see you somewhere we're not interrupted every 2 minutes. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then I smiled. I'd like that too. As she drove away, I realized something. For almost a year, Fridays had been my favorite day because I got to see Lucy. Now, I had something new to look forward to. Friday evening. The week passed more slowly than usual. Every morning I caught myself wondering if Friday would feel awkward. Maybe we'd pretend nothing had happened. Maybe inviting me to dinner had only been her way of saying thank you. I told myself not to overthink it. It didn't work. Friday finally arrived. For the first time in almost a year, I wasn't looking forward to lunch. I was looking forward to the evening. When I walked into Parker's Corner Cafe, everything seemed normal. Susan waved from behind the register. "Adam, you're late again." I looked at my watch. 3 whole minutes. She laughed. "I was beginning to think we'd have to eat your sandwich ourselves." Lucy walked over carrying my coffee. "So that's the real reason you keep coming here." "I knew it. I'm only here for the free pie." She smiled. "I should probably stop giving it to you." "You wouldn't. You sound awfully confident." "I've studied your weakness." "And what's that?" "You can't say no to nice people." She laughed. I walked right into that one. Lunch felt almost the same as always. Almost. Every now and then our eyes met. Neither of us mentioned dinner. Neither of us had to. Both of us knew it was happening. When I finished eating, Lucy quietly placed the receipt on the table. There wasn't a note this time. Instead, she simply whispered, "7. I'll pick you up." Her smile answered before her words did. "I'll be ready." At exactly 7 o'clock, I parked outside her apartment building. It was a modest brick building only 10 minutes from the diner. Lucy stepped outside almost immediately. She wore a light blue dress instead of her work uniform. For a second, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked beautiful. Not because of the dress, because she looked relaxed. Free. She climbed into the passenger seat. "You clean up pretty well." I laughed. I was about to say the same thing. She looked down, smiling. "Thank you." I took her to a small Italian restaurant across town. Nothing expensive. Nothing fancy. Just quiet enough that we could actually talk. No ringing phones. No customers calling her name every 30 seconds. No coffee refills. Just us. After we ordered, Lucy looked around the restaurant. "This feels strange." "Why?" "This is the first Friday evening I've had off in almost 6 months." "Really?" She nodded. "I switched shifts. My coworker owed me a favor." I smiled. "So, this dinner required planning." "A lot." "I'm honored." "You should be." As the evening went on, the conversation became easier. We talked about childhood memories, favorite movies, terrible first jobs, travel dreams. At one point Lucy laughed so hard she nearly spilled her drink. "What?" "I just realized. I know almost everything about your lunch order, but I had no idea what your favorite color is." I smiled. "Blue." She nodded proudly. "I guessed right." "You guessed." "I noticed. My tie. My truck. My coffee mug." She grinned. "I told you. I notice things." I shook my head. "I don't know whether that's impressive or a little scary." She laughed. "I'll take impressive." As dinner came to an end, the waiter placed the check on the table. Before I could reach for it, Lucy grabbed it. "Absolutely not." I raised an eyebrow. "You invited me." "I know. So let me." She smiled stubbornly. "This dinner was my thank you. And I don't argue with my own invitations." I laughed. "I don't think I'm going to win this." "No, you're not." For the first time in a very long while, paying the bill didn't matter. Being there did. And as we walked out of the restaurant together, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much bigger than either of us had expected. Over the next few weeks, Friday nights quietly became our thing. Neither of us ever suggested making it official. Neither of us had to. If one of us couldn't make it, we'd let the other know. Otherwise, 7 o'clock, every Friday, without fail. One evening we walked through the town square after dinner. A small farmer's market was closing for the night. Someone was playing an old guitar near the fountain. Lucy stopped walking. "I haven't heard this song in years." "You know it. My dad used to play it." She smiled softly. "He wasn't very good, but he loved trying." I looked at her. You still miss him. Every day. She didn't try to hide it. I think I always will. I nodded. I still talk to my mom sometimes. She looked surprised. She passed away 8 years ago. Lucy smiled gently. I think she'd like that. I hope so. For a while, neither of us said another word. Sometimes silence says everything. As September turned into October, people at the diner started noticing. Susan noticed first. One Friday she walked over while Lucy was refilling my coffee. So, she smiled. Should I keep pretending I don't know what's going on? Lucy nearly dropped the coffee pot. Mom, what? I'm asking. Lucy looked at me, then back at Susan. We've only had dinner a few times. Susan laughed. That's exactly what I said when I met her father. Lucy buried her face in her hands. I can't believe you're doing this. I'm your mother. It's practically my job. Even I couldn't stop laughing. Life slowly began to feel lighter. Work was still busy. Bills still arrived. Some mornings were still stressful. But now, every Friday gave me something to look forward to. And somehow, that changed the rest of the week too. One rainy evening, about a month after the note, Lucy and I were locking the diner after Susan had already gone home. She handed me one side of the closed sign. I never thanked you properly. You've thanked me plenty. No, I thanked you for walking me to my car. She looked directly into my eyes. I never thanked you for believing me. I frowned slightly. Why wouldn't I? She took a slow breath. Because not everyone did. That sentence hit harder than I expected. My manager at my old job told me I was overreacting. My cousin said Brian was probably just lonely. One customer even said I should be flattered. She looked away. You never questioned me. You simply asked what I needed. I reached for her hand. Very gently. You deserved to be believed. Her eyes filled with tears. Not tears of fear. Tears of relief. She smiled. I think that's the nicest thing anyone said to me in a very long time. Without thinking, she stepped closer, wrapped her arms around me, and hugged me, not because she was scared anymore, because she finally felt safe. I held her just as gently. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. For months, our story had been built on small moments. A smile, a joke, a cup of coffee, a folded note. Now, it felt like all of those little moments had quietly led us here. Standing outside a small family diner, holding each other in the rain, realizing that sometimes the people who change your life don't arrive all at once. Sometimes, they simply smile at you every Friday until one day they're brave enough to hand you a note. Winter arrived earlier than anyone expected. The first snow covered the sidewalks on a Thursday night. By Friday morning, Parker's Corner Cafe looked like something from an old Christmas postcard. White rooftops, warm yellow lights, the smell of fresh cinnamon drifting through the front door. When I walked inside, Susan looked up from the register. About time. I laughed. I'm exactly on time. She shook her head. You used to come here for lunch. Now I think you're just here to see my daughter. Lucy walked out of the kitchen carrying 2 mugs of coffee. I can still hear you, Mom. I know. I wanted you to. Lucy rolled her eyes. You are impossible. Susan smiled proudly. I've earned that title. Business slowed down after lunch. Only one elderly couple remained in the corner booth. Lucy finally sat across from me for the first time. Not for work. Just because she wanted to. You know. She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. I never told you why I smiled every Friday. I looked at her. I assumed you smiled at everyone. I do. But not like that. I waited. The first time you came in. You thanked me. I blinked. For bringing my lunch? She nodded. You'd be surprised how many people never even look at their server. They order. They eat. They leave. You looked me in the eye. You said thank you. You wished me a good weekend. She smiled softly. I remember thinking, he seems different. I laughed. That's a pretty low standard. It wasn't just that. The next week, you remembered my name. I did. You looked at my name tag and actually used it. She shook her head. It sounds silly, but little things matter. I smiled. I guess they do. She reached into her apron pocket. I've got something to show you. She unfolded a tiny piece of paper. It was worn around the edges. You kept the note? She laughed. No. You kept yours. I kept mine. She handed it to me. Written in blue ink were the words she'd practiced before giving me the real note. Can we talk outside? Crossed out. Underneath it, would you wait for me after work? Also crossed out. Then another. I need your help. Crossed out. Finally, the sentence she'd actually given me. Please wait outside. Don't let anyone see us talking. I looked back up. You wrote all of these? She nodded. I was terrified. I must have rewritten it 20 times. You could have just asked. She laughed. I know. But I didn't know if you'd say yes. I smiled. I would have. I know that now. That evening, after the diner closed, we walked outside together. Snowflakes drifted slowly through the air. Lucy slipped her hand into mine. Comfortably. Naturally. No hesitation. As we reached my truck, she looked up at me. You know something? What? I used to think that folded note was the scariest thing I'd ever done. And now, she smiled. Now I'm grateful I was brave for 5 seconds. I laughed. 5 seconds. That's all it took. She squeezed my hand. 5 seconds changed my whole life. I looked at the little diner behind us, at the warm lights glowing through the windows, at Susan waving from inside with the biggest smile on her face. Then back at Lucy. It's funny. What is? I thought I kept coming here because the food was good. She laughed. It is good. It is. But that wasn't the real reason. No, I shook my head. I came back every Friday because there was always one smile waiting for me. Lucy smiled even wider. And now, I gently kissed her forehead. Now I don't have to wait until Friday anymore. She leaned her head against my shoulder. I liked the sound of that. As the snow continued to fall around us, I realized something. Sometimes love doesn't begin with grand gestures. Sometimes it begins with a familiar smile, a shared cup of coffee, and one small folded note that changes 2 lives forever.